behalf of the Alliance for Education Board of Directors, I appreciate the opportunity to come and to visit with you. And like Bobby, I'm not going to take a specific position on the bond issue. I think the people in Bossier Parish need to take a position on the bond issue, and I will let you determine whether you think it's the right or the wrong thing for your business, for your kids, or for your home. I will say that we're very pleased at the Alliance that people in Bossier Parish have long supported public education. And we're big supporters of public education. In fact, I walked in right at 10 o'clock because I was trying to watch what is quite frankly an assault on many levels in Baton Rouge on public education. There's about a 7-hour committee meeting going on right now. The governor had just finished testifying, and the state superintendent was beginning his testimony on vouchers and charters and virtual school and all the changes that are coming. And I'll get to that at the end because I think some of that is relevant. I think it is relevant to understand the world in which we live, and the world in which we live is changing. And I do think that does play a part in all of this, because we don't know what's going to happen with K-12 education. And yet, here in Bossier Parish, you're looking at a significant tax increase. And I will say that. There's no way around this. This is a significant tax increase. I'm the biggest critic of Caddo Parish there is, and their budget and their current taxation is only 78 mills, and it's coming down. And one reason Caddo comes down every year, and I've had this question, and we'll go over this with Bossier millage, is when you do bonds, the history of bonds are you sell bonds. And then the bonds have a lifetime that the bonds pay out. It's kind of like having a house note. You agree to borrow money and pay it back over a series of years. And being the guy that did the Bossier bond issue a couple of years ago from the public side to build the new schools, the $75 million bond issue, I've had a question for a number of years how the bond is about to be paid off. And I think it's significant because I think what we did when we look at the numbers, and I would encourage people to look at this, is I think we've never lowered the millage rate in Bossier. I think we agreed to charge whatever the millage rate was year one, and we've hammered that millage rate for a number of years, and that's how we're now in a situation where we can actually pay the millage off. I think we're paying it off way early, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think we're about to pay this bond millage off early. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But when we get to what I'm going to talk about in a second, what we're talking about doing, it is no change to your taxes. I will agree on that. But we're talking about extending out that millage rate for another 20 years at the current level. And so everybody has the sheet. I'm going to go over just where I think we stand. School systems get money from 3 sources. And it's important to understand this. All public school systems get money from 3 sources. Number one, well, we'll start at the top. They get money from the federal government. That generally comes in the form of what's called Title monies, Title I, Title II, Title IV, feeding program monies, special grants. Recent years, this included some stimulus dollars. Bossier Parish gets its fair share. The biggest thing you need to understand for federal dollars, there'll be no more federal dollars coming. I think it's pretty clear at the top level, there is no more federal relief coming. Matter of fact, the feds, from a policy standpoint, are pushing all costs to the state. That's what's going on at the national level, I will suggest. Number 2, you get money from the state. In Louisiana, we live in a French monarchy, however you want to refer to it. All the taxes are collected. They're all sent to Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge then redistributes them back out to the people. In this case, the people is Bossier Parish School Board. And they get funding primarily from what's called the Minimum Foundation Program, the MFP dollars. It is the state allocation, depending on where you are in the state. It is sort of a Robin Hood-esque type funding formula. Everybody refers to Texas because of the Robin Hood rules. We sort of have that in Louisiana because it's an inverse situation. The more local dollars you pour in from local funds, that third source I'm going to get to, the less state funding you get. So it's sort of a Robin Hood situation. And quite frankly, most of our parishes around here do very well on local dollars. You've already seen Caddo's ahead of you. I will tell you, Webster, some of the others are not too far behind or right where Bossier is as well. So we actually get less MFP dollars. It is important to understand the more local dollars we pour in, it will have an effect on the MFP. You will get less MFP dollars the way the formula is set up today. I believe you're also going to see less MFP dollars in the coming years because of the other reform things going on. I think Bossier's got hit pretty hard with having to pay for some of the special schools, the school for the blind, the school for the deaf. Those types of funding things are going to continue to roll back. Point being, from the big picture, the second source of funding, state dollars, there'll be no more state dollars. It's safe to say wherever you are in state dollars is where you are in state dollars. In fact, state dollars will probably go down And as long as the current governor is governor, there's no way they're going up. He has frozen MFP formula. They're actually having conversations to find out, can they lower the MFP formula? And we'll see what he does in future years. That leaves the third source of funding, local dollars. What we, the local people, vote on for taxation. What you have before you is a breakdown of the local dollars. This is what we're talking about. You have a parish-wide sales tax of 1.75%. That was 1.5 for a long time. It went up about a quarter back with the last bond issue. It's currently at 1.75. That's about average. That's about average for parishes statewide on sales tax. You have below you, and Bobby hit these numbers, I think, in his big master chart you had, the green column. They were all there. I put them together for you, and we'll go over how Bossier collects its money. They have two constitutional taxes. Every local education authority, that's what a local school board is deemed under the Constitution, gets a certain right to just charge a constitutional tax. That means it's approved when you're given status to be a school district. There's never a vote held, whether it's renewed or not. It's just on the books. In Bossier's situation, there's two constitutional taxes. One is 3.27 mils. The other is 2.75 mils. Now, you'll see some asterisks next to the second one. The best that I can determine, that 2.75 mils has always been used to help pay construction and ongoing facilities and things. It becomes relevant here in a second when we put two of them together to get to the 13.55. That's why I've signaled it. But those came together back when, as Bobby explained, you had we consolidated all the small districts a number of years ago to have one parish-wide school system for bonding, and now they're all together in one. And so those are two constitutional. The big deal is they never expire, they never require a vote of the people. They are just on the books for about 6.5 mils. There are three that the people have voted on in Bossier Parish over the life of Bossier Parish that currently are still in the books. One is called Maintenance and Operations. It was voted in somewhere in around 2003. It is a 10 mil tax, 10 property mills. It will expire in 2013. Now, you'll see there that the most current levy is 7.45. What does that mean? That means you voted in a tax that the school board's authorized to collect 10 mils on, and over the years, it's the board, the school board, has voted to roll that back. You'll hear the rollback discussion during the summer. And so the school board has rolled back that tax over the last several years to only now collect 7.45 mils of that. And so in tax terms, they have room under the cap because they're legally authorized to charge 10 by any vote of the board. The board could have collected this last month if they wanted to. They could have voted to roll this back up to 10 mils with no vote of the people, and they could collect that. They can do that at any time this tax is on the books. There's a second tax called salaries that was passed the exact same time. It's a 10 mil tax, and the board's also rolled that down to 7.45. It also will expire at the end of 2013. And so if you put those two together, there's 5.1 mils of under the cap room right now the Bossier Parish School Board has that at any board meeting they can vote to collect at the end of that school year or the end of that tax year. They can authorize the sheriff to collect it. The most important thing to me in this category is not really under the cap. It's the last column. It's 2013. These are current taxes on the books that Bossier counts to balance their budget that come up for renewal at the end of the 2013 tax year. That means that the new sheriff at the end of this year will charge, right now, 7.45 mils twice. He will charge it next year, 2013. On January 1st, 2014, those are off the books, unless Bossier comes to you as the voters and asks you to renew those taxes. That's not what we're talking about today. Let's make it clear. That's another vote that will have to come to the people in Bossier Parish within the next 12 to 18 months in order to authorize the school board the right to continue to collect their existing dollars. And and again, I'm not taking a full position on the actual proposal. One of the criticisms we offered it to Caddo, since we're going to compare ourselves to Caddo. In Caddo, we stopped Caddo from doing this. In Caddo, we said, why don't you come for your renewal taxes first before you go for raises in new buildings? Well, if you understand what I just outlined in those two taxes, it's effectively what we're doing in Bossier Parish. We're coming for raises in new buildings, and we're going to come back a year from now and ask the voters to vote again for Bossier schools to fund this. We'll come back to that. There's another salary tax. It's the big one. It's 26 mils. It was approved by the voters back in about 2005. It is currently being collected at 20.54. So again, that's 5.46 mils under the cap. And so you put those two numbers together, that's almost 10 mils they're under the cap. That the school board, by any vote, could vote to just in charge what we, the people, have authorized them to already collect. That tax, you'll note, expires at the end of 2015. That's another vote that will have to come up in the next probably 2.5 years before you get back. The last category is not renewable. It's bond and interest. Whenever we hold elections like we're going to hold in April, and you're asked to do construction, you're basically agreeing to borrow money, take out a note, and pay it back over a certain period of time. When you do that, there's no renewal on that. You've made the agreement as the public with the bond holders, and you've authorized now the district through the sheriff to collect whatever millage is required that year to pay that note. This is where I get kind of confused, because I think the law says you collect whatever millage is required to pay the bond note. And so in growing economies, typically if you start out at 10.55 mils and the economy grows, the next year it should be 10 mils. And if the economy grows, it should be 9.7 and 9. And the millage shrinks over time. I think in Bossier what we've done, I may misunderstand it, anyone's welcome to correct me, I think we've kept the millage rate at that exact year one number for a number of years. And that's how we're paying it off early. And I'm not getting into that series of bonds. I don't know if there's an early penalty for payoff or etc., but we're paying it off early. But it becomes relevant now because when we get to the proposals, what we're proposing doing is we're proposing maintaining the 13.55 mils for the next 20 years. The proposal was put together backwards. The proposal was put together by asking if we extended 13.55 mils out to how much could we borrow. That's how everything was put together. So let's look at what's being asked. I think Sonja did a very good job of going over it. There is a construction request for $210 million, and it's 13.55 mils. It may be over 20 years. I may have 10 there. Actually, I've got it right here. I'll look at this. It's 20 years. I've got a typo there. That should be 20 years. So it's $210 million over 20 years, 13.55. You'll see from my notes above where you get the 13.55. You're basically agreeing to extend out the current bond and interest. Rather than it going away, it's going to extend out for another 20 years. And to that, you're dedicating the 2.75 constitutional tax, which has always been put toward buildings and grounds, is my understanding as well. You add those together, you get 13.55 mils. You go to a bond attorney, you ask them how much money that will generate over 20 years. It's apparently $210 million. That's Proposition 1. I'm not going into what it pays for. I actually think it's a pretty solid request. When you look at the needs of Bossier, it is a growing community. I think that's for the voters to determine, are you getting your value? The second request, the salary request, is to basically add a new tax. It'd be, if you look up above, there are currently 6 lines up there. You're adding another line to that revenue part up top. It'd be a 7th line. It would say salaries. It would say 9.25 mils, voter authorized. Whatever the levy is, probably 9.25 the first year. And it'd have a renewal date 10 years down the road. It would come up for renewal. And I think there's no debate that that is a new tax to give a 5% raise. Technology fund, same thing. You're adding an 8th line to the revenue chart up top. It would say technology. It would say 3 mils. It would say 3 mils. And it would say about 10 years from now on renewal. So you add up the renewal requests, as I appreciate it, that will be on the ballot in April, and it adds up to 26.4 mils. That's what you're being asked to authorize as voters. Taking into account that the 13.55 is restructuring and agreeing to extend out debt, that means you're asking for an increase of 12.85 mils. That's the net increase of this. It's always nice to see tax numbers when it's only $5 a month, when it's $12 a month. But when you got to add all those numbers together, and you got to put them on top of what you're already paying to understand what you're really being asked. And so you have below a timeline I put together based on what could happen. Currently in 2011, the sheriff charged 52.26 mils. I think that was on Bossier Parish's slides. If the voters approve all 3 issues on the April ballot, you'll be taking the 52.26 to 65.11. That is an increase of 12 mils. That's an increase of about, 10% would be 5 mils. 20% would be 10 mils. So that's a tax increase of about 25%, 24%, percentage-wise, what you're increasing. No one is suggesting at this point anything would change in 2012. that would affect the 2013 taxation. But as I mentioned before, there's 2 renewals out there. Those 2 renewals will have to be dealt with sometime in 2012 or 2013 for the 2014 tax year. And I made a note on my chart, they could increase 5.1. I think the Caddo Parish Sheriff recently learned if you try to ask for less, it's not called a renewal. He's having that legal problem with the bond issue, or with the bond commission right now in Baton Rouge. Because Sheriff Prater in Caddo, his millages has come down a little bit over the years. He tried to send that through as a renewal request. The bond commission said, no, you authorize 5 mil taxes. If you go less, then that's not a renewal, it's a new tax. So, if we go for renewals, we're going to have to renew them at the 10 mil tax. If we don't go for renewals, we can't call them renewals. We have to call them a new tax. It's a political issue when boards go. So I put on there the potential that those could go up 5.1. That potentially could take you to a 70.21. Now, the board has not said what they're doing with that out tax. I'm just putting it there as a person who looks at dollars, because at any vote, 7 board members can vote at any member, and really maybe 8 for this one, I think, to roll it forward. It's maybe a super vote for a school board. But you see, so you're looking to take 52.26 to 65.11. That's what Bossier's looking at doing, as I appreciate it. I think the question for voters would be, what am I getting in return? I don't disagree with the thing the school board put up on their chart. I think they have needs for new buildings. I don't disagree with the thing they said about their pay scale. I will point out DeSoto's cutting its budget. They announced just this week that they are cutting their budget. The Haynesville Shale is going to catch up with some of these other school districts. I will point out we seem to want to compare ourselves to our neighbors to the west and our neighbors to the east. Both are laying off over 100 employees this year. And so there comes an issue called sustainability. What can you afford? I'll give you some other numbers just for reference point. Bossier does have one of the better systems in Louisiana. It's a good, solid system. For tax purposes, the average millage rate in Louisiana is right at 40 mils. You are already at 52. You're looking to go to 65. Again, I'm not saying that's out of whack. As you know, Caddo is 78 and trending down. East Baton Rouge Parish is 54, to give you a reference point of another major city. And so you're not out of whack, I think, where your millage is. I think it comes down to what you're getting in return. And so that's where I think the taxpayers of Bossier have to evaluate what they're being asked to do and figure out what it means to them. That said, I'll be glad to take any questions about what's going on. The other piece that I would just suggest everybody follows is, what is going to be the impact of change? We're looking at growing numbers in Bossier, 400 students, a new elementary school every 10 years. What is the impact of change? Because if vouchers are being given out, and I do believe, for the record, that vouchers are only going to be B&F schools when they're all done. And just so everybody doesn't, lose a lot of sleep over vouchers, the record on vouchers is pretty clear. If you look at mature markets like Florida and Indiana, where they've had the program in place for a number of years, you see less than 2% of kids execute vouchers. Vouchers aren't the real threat, I guess, to local school systems. You'll have some kids move, but there's not a lot of private school capacity, and there's almost zero private school capacity in Bossier Parish. You do lose a lot of kids in Bossier Parish to Southfield, to some of the schools over in Caddo, to Loyola, and you may see some of that go. But if they remove the C qualification and only go with D&F schools for vouchers, there aren't many D&F schools in Bossier Parish. You should be very proud of that. And so I don't think vouchers are going to hurt Bossier as much. Charter schools will be a different situation. I think when charter schools come up and running, I do think you'll see charter schools come into Bossier. I do think you'll see more kids go to charter schools. And what charter schools will also do, charter schools are not open to a single parish. And so you may look around and say, there are no charter schools setting up in Bossier Parish. That's okay. But if they open their doors in Caddo, if they open their door in Webster, a kid in Bossier Parish will be able to enroll in that school. A charter school has an open enrollment across parish lines. So I think Bossier will probably lose some kids to charter schools, and don't know how many, but when you're looking at growth numbers, how's that going to affect your growth? And one of the major areas I'm concerned about, and I will just make 2 comments on the bond issue that we're looking at, and we do anticipate the Alliance of coming out at a certain point and offering an opinion on the complete package now that it's been approved by the board. I think the board's done a good job of working through this. Is the 2 concerns that we had 3. One was the use of leased money to lease space at Cyber Command, and as of today, I don't see that in the bond issue. Is that fair to say it's not there anymore? Yeah, well, it was correct. It was discussed, and so that was one of our, correct. And so that was one of our concerns. That's been removed because the bond issue can only buy capital equipment. It can't lease space. And so our other two concerns we've always had that we still have that we're going to talk about is, it was mentioned the Bossier Parish School Board's the number 2 employer. The number 1 employer is Barksdale Air Force Base. And there's been a conversation ongoing for a number of years about the Barksdale School, about land, about building something. I don't see that in this proposal. And we're concerned about the impact that the Bossier employees have on the local economy. I'm concerned the impact that Barksdale has on the local economy. And I would hope that any bond issue that's $200 million for the next 20 years would have addressed that. I don't see it addressed. I'm a graduate of Bossier High School. On Friday nights, I'm the voice of Bossier High School. I think that Bossier High School needs to be addressed. I don't think we need to close it today. I think that we need to have a plan of when we are going to close it, where are those 600 kids going to go? Are we building the capacity to airline that parkway to take those kids the year we have to make that close? And so that's the two issues that we've looked at, that we will continue to look at. And beyond that, I will tell you, I think the board's done an excellent job with the bond proposal. I think it meets the needs of Bossier as Bossier continues to grow. And I think that for voters who own property, it's going to be a simple exchange of are they happy with their school system or are they not happy with their school system. I think if they're happy, they're going to vote to approve this. And quite frankly, I think Bossier has a pretty good chance to pass this bond issue. But for business owners, I think we saw on the slide, it's 80% statewide and 71% is the number, Bobby, of business owners. I think business owners need to take a careful look at what the cost is going to be. Because my look is about a 22% increase to the taxation for just schools. And I've long believed that Bossier runs on 3 platforms. It runs on good public safety, it runs on good economic development, and it runs on good schools. And so the question I would just say for the business owners is, are you happy where you're at? I will say I think you get a good product in return. I think you have one of the best school systems in Louisiana. And with that, I'll defer to the panel. I guess we'll answer any questions. And hopefully I gave you a decent overview of, I think, what's going to happen to the overall taxation level.